It's so common to speak about Chopin when you're a pianist or a teacher of piano or just a music lover or even somebody who is interested in understanding why this music moves us so much from very different points of view. It means so many things to so many people. And even professional pianists don't agree, let less music lovers, musicologists, scholars, writers, editors, publishers. Everybody tries to frame, if not define, what is the ingredient that makes Chopin so personally intimate to each of us. His classicism compared to other romantics in the form, for sure. His short life and not developing beyond a certain style that he inherited, in which he might have at least left if he was to become an 80-year-old composer, which he was not given the chance, given the sanitary situation of Paris. And sadly, we will never know. While we don't have to be wondering what would have when we have what is. And I don't say what was. Some people think the ethnic importance, the Polish folkloric music and poetic background of Mickiewicz, the pride of coming from a small country in size which was constantly fought for and in many ways constantly owned by other countries, and therefore a sense of pride that comes from the fact that it survives through its spirit and its Christianism and its connection to its own values of expression of what is of course, heroic in the 19th century, revolutionary heroism or the wounded hero, the imagery of the 19th century being the one of the Romanticism, which in fact meant, after the Classicism, breaking the frame and therefore let loose the expression without any form of, or very little, of attachment to frame the means of it. Liszt with his single movement sonata, well, cyclic, and Berg later in the Expressionism, and Scriabin exploring beyond tonality in mysticism, and Prokofiev with his percussive and apparently non-sentimental, compared to Rachmaninoff, very emotional, nostalgic, melodic, Stravinsky going astray anyway, or with every different genre of music that he becomes or it becomes him, chameleon-like. All these composers chose how to filter, I find that be very fascinating, the different trends of the day, the jazz in Ravel, the classicism in Brahms, whose, as we know, 10th Symphony of Beethoven was the title for the premiere of the review of his first symphony. So yes, we have those composers who apparently, for us chronologically studying them, look behind towards the formal, like Chopin for his sonatas, none of them in single movement. But the essence is not to be revolutionary or not, to be tonal or atonal. This is in a way the language and the trade and possibly the industry of being. It does not mean that it's what deeply triggers this message that they have to deliver through a narrative style, with or without lyrics, with or without an impression that the music has to be the reflection of the human condition, situations like a funeral march compared to other moods or other needs of spiritual or daily life. Pure music, pianistically pure music. What is the pianist alone? Imitating the voice, the singing, imitating the orchestra with the might, compared to imitation also of polyphony. And Chopin uses a lot of quick harmonic progression changes in the virtuosity of the mesmerizing speed of harmonic changes when he needs to, like in the fourth ballade before the coda, or then the opposite, staying completely in a narrative, contemplative state with his early ballad movement sections, or the preludes, or his etudes, not all some. It's all about soulful expression. He had to express something with a Parisian elegance, at least as agreed for the time to be that. And I think that his music would have been different had he continuously lived in Poland. And did he or not take his French father's component into his cultural mix? Was it just a DNA fact? And was he really not interested in French literature, even if he was so close and chosen by Georges Sand for partner, that he never felt being tortured by his own angsts and emotionally moving by his own inner sufferance? Chromatic music, descending scales, a sense of sigh, a sense of lament and nostalgia, and so the vulnerability of Chopin's strength, even when he is proud and strong and projecting what manhood in a heroic sense of the romantic era meant, which was mostly warrior, a powerful man. Women didn't have the social right to choose what they do, let less, but they were cultivated in order to be traded for land or wealth among the bankers and the landowners. And they were the ones who vehicled Chopin and the art and the importance of Delacroix as a painter and the writers. There was a section of society, of course the top elite, which proud of its achievements financially, needed always to find through the salons some kind of, that's how I see it at least, legitimacy of their money, which was not that old. I mean, all these revolutions were consecutive civil wars in France between the end of the 17th and most of the 18th century, into the 19th century mostly, of course, because still the French Revolution, the one that started it all, was at the end of the 18th century rather. But you know what is really fascinating is that if you take Chopin out of all this context and the education that he received and the pride of his nationality or his belonging to his ancestors, his beloved Poland, admired and idealized, and at the same time he writes a revolutionary etude, just vain gesture of heroism, but somehow artistically the women always were the ones to promote him, either because he taught their daughters of the rich society as well as the mothers who knew how to play piano, and so there was a intimate connection with the women who were influential within the homes and the estates, and who created the good taste in the men who were busy either making money or war. And inevitably, in these turbulent times, there was needs for escapism in novels, in writings, in philosophy, in enlightenment. Goethe and Schiller and in Victor Hugo in France, and you intertwine a lot of things at the same time between history of the events as they have unfolded, between returns to monarchies and coup d'etat by the nephew of Napoleon, and then return to republic, So he didn't live in such a peaceful place compared to had he lived in Poland. But it's so touching to imagine that when he was dying in Paris in his late 30s, his sister asked for Fontana, his childhood friend, or at least music school friend from Polish years, to come and preside over an edition of his works that he collected to complete a first opus of all his works. Of course, today with the authenticity and the 3 copies for each score for 3 publishers that was either by him or students, we have a plethora of originals or authenticities, and if people want to be picky about details, they can argue and contra-argue that the Paderewski edition compared to the Ekier 1 or Ekier 2 with the Polish national edition, or then of course Henle that started the Urtext project for everything, included also Chopin now, the objectivization of the editions compared to the subjectivization of the editings at the time of famous pianists who were publishing these before World War II. And people wanted to sound like them because they were sort of the heroes in the follow or flow of Chopin, like Georges Mathias and his student Isidore Philippe. There was a lineage, Liszt and Nietschitsky and Clara Wieck and her multiple students. And all this created a sense of belonging. I think Chopin appears and disappears before he had blossomed. Of course, the rhapsodies of Liszt or the ballades, and I think especially the barcarolle of Chopin, define all what he's written in one piece. It's like all his life in one piece. He has all the ingredients, but also a new way to organize them. And this is the maturity compared to the youth, where you have to go from a section through a transition to the next section. And even so, the powerful beauty, the inspirational, it's just like so captivating by the melodic quality that the frame of his youthful formal writing didn't stop our admiration, because the power injected through the emotional meaning of the melodic lines. If Chopin has beautiful middle voices, and they can be and are sometimes confusing the message of the melody, and they have left-hand deep basses with their melodic line through many bars, plus the harmonization of their arpeggios, or their large and stretch and retract arpeggios patterns like in the etudes. He has this independence of presenting the 2 hands, as he supposedly said, my right hand ignores what my left hand does. In fact, he's in the spontaneity through an always, in fact, notated, perhaps without the sonatas, but for most of the other pieces, notated, fulgurant, French word, driven, inspired, improvisatory thrusts of music that come out of him like a volcano. And the beauty, I think, of it all is beyond its characterization, its placement in a given time period, historically as well as geographically and socially, is that his music is greater than him. It came through him, like through Mozart, like through Bach, like through Schumann, like through all these composers. Whatever their lives were, it's their works that mean to us timelessly what it is, and then we want to know more about them. So we start to try to find bridges between their lives and their commitments and their awarenesses and what it meant. But in fact, not always can we justify, explain, understand. It's curiosity, but not always a bridging. At least for me, it's the works, which are so timeless, that they mean so much to us today, soulfully, emotionally, and humanistically, and even spiritually too. Chopin is so many things to so many people. Besides, for the pianists who play, no matter how difficult, ergonomically designed, the arpeggios, the patterns, the way he elegantly brings the structure to be never heavy, always elegant in the sense of noble, in the sense of naturally beautiful, not forced by affects and know-hows, though he did know quite a lot, but he seems to let this most beautiful flow of inspiration be the guide, and is quasi-unadulterated, unfiltered, even if there are these thousands of discrepancies between the different editions, all claiming to be more original than the other because of so many manuscripts, which willingly or not contain those little details. But the whole picture is inspirational and inspired and inspiring today. What a dream come true.